Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, I've gotten a little bit of a late start here, but I'm surprised this part of what I'm going to go over today didn't get more attention. The fact that allegedly Nick Reiner admits he killed his parents. Now, what he thinks it is, though, is he thinks there's some sort of conspiracy going on. And that's the part that I would take issue with here, too. Also to note, check out the Man Talks interview I did the other day. I thought that was a really good discussion. And also, someone criticized me today. They said, "Oh, Jared, all you're doing here is making condescending comments towards other people's videos." And I said, no, that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm sharing my own personal experience with addiction and mental health and my knowledge with narcissism and my own personal experience being involved with people like that and putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. That's what I'm doing. If you want to say that's just making condescending comments, okay, I don't want you here then. That's what I would say to that. No time for it. What up there, Mac? Phil Bradley, neither late nor early, just on time per usual. What's shaking there, Jimmy? Sam? Ty Cena? And welcome, everybody. We're letting some Black Sheep flow on in here.
You ready for the next line here in the Reiner saga? The next piece of information being thrown into the ether by the defense of Nick Reiner. Nick thinks it's a conspiracy. He doesn't know why he's locked up. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. We're going to dive into this a little bit. Schizophrenia is certainly a real thing. Mental illness is certainly a real thing. Addiction is certainly a real thing. And somebody that has a history, a long documented pattern of lying and manipulating to reduce consequences or completely eliminate them for himself certainly is also a very real thing. And it happens to be attached to the man named Nick Reiner. All of this, is it a play? Is it a play so when he pleads insanity, it sticks? It's accepted? Or is it not a play at all? Is it just simply a reflection of reality and how his brain is truly working right now? I don't know the answer to that. You don't know the answer to that, but it's kind of a boy who cried wolf thing to a certain extent.
And this is the thing with any NGI plea is when someone truly is insane, the best they can hope to do is say, okay, it leaves clues. People who are truly insane will say or do certain things that are going to look similar. That's the best you can do because no one can put themselves completely in another person's shoes, right? And that's another one of the reasons that it's pretty difficult to get one of these. Although I think Jimmy did send me something that said 25% of NGI cases actually work. I'm surprised it's even that amount.
And manipulate. That's what addicts do. And sometimes the manipulation is because they believe the crazy things going on in their minds. Sometimes they just do it so they don't have to face consequences for their own actions. If I were a betting man, I'm going to go with Nick is doing this so he doesn't face consequences for his own actions or lessens the blow, considering death is a possibility in this one.
And honestly, that would be my vote too. My vote would be he's trying to avoid accountability or at least have the punishment be not as severe. I mean, what else would you think it possibly is? Is it like truly like so insane that he didn't really know or he didn't know the character and the likeness of what he did? I don't know. His backstory just doesn't point to that to me.
We're going to go through this and these new claims. And I'd love to get your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube or on our Substack, hiddenkillers.substack.com. The link is in the description. You can join right now for absolutely free. Okay. Nick Reiner, he admits he killed his parents. You know, that's not really in dispute. He's not claiming innocence there. He's not saying someone else did it. Excuse me. According to sources, take a sip of my tea here. According to sources, speaking to TMZ, sources with direct knowledge, Nick Reiner knows he ended the lives of Rob and Michelle Reiner. But he...
Source with direct knowledge. Who could that be? Could it be Alan Jackson from before? Could it be Jake and Romy Reiner? Could it be the new public defender? Could it be a doctor that's treated him while he's at the Twin Towers? I mean, a doctor's probably not allowed to say anything, right? But who could be the person that said that Tony Bruschi is getting this from? I'd like to hear some opinions out there.
Here's where it gets a little complicated. Those same sources say Nick genuinely does not understand why he's sitting in a jail cell. He believes his incarceration is part of a conspiracy against him. Let that one sink in for a second. A man who acknowledges committing double homicide believes the people holding him accountable are the ones doing something wrong. And before you dismiss that as obvious insanity, which, to be fair, it might be, consider that this claim leaked to TMZ at this exact moment is also the precise narrative an insanity defense needs the public to absorb before a trial. Consider that Nick Reiner has spent years making it impossible to distinguish between genuine delusion and strategic manipulation. And consider that both things might be true at the same time.
And this is the other thing, though, with addiction plus personality disorders. There is nothing they won't try to use to their advantage to get what they want and to avoid accountability. And some people that don't understand personality disorders or addiction, they may not understand how far someone's willing to go. But there literally is nothing that some of them won't do. And like some people would say, oh, they would never steal from their grandmother. And I would say, well, check out any addicts that you have seen. And guess what? A lot of them did steal from their grandmother if only they had the opportunity to do so. So there is nothing too sacred a lot of times. And so this is something you have to keep in mind, that they're going to do anything they can or use anything they can to avoid accountability. So all of that still falls under this umbrella here. But like Tony said, more than one thing can be true at the same time. And it's just going to be very difficult to truly know. But I think it's more than likely an attempt to avoid accountability.
Your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube and our Substack, okay? Join our Substack. It's absolutely free right now, by the way, and you can interact directly with me here in the studio. So check that out. Okay, so this is the problem. Both might be true simultaneously. That's the whole problem. Not whether Nick is sick. He clearly is. The problem is that Nick Reiner built a life around exploiting the uncertainty his illness creates. And now his freedom depends on people believing him. People who have no reason.
That was a great line by Tony there. So we play it again. But he made a living off of exploiting the uncertainty his mental illness creates. That's a great way to put it.
Freedom depends on people believing him. People who have... Join our Substack. It's absolutely free right now, by the way, and you can interact directly with me here in the studio. So check that out. Okay, so this is the problem. Both might be true simultaneously. That's the whole problem. Not whether Nick is sick. He clearly is. The problem is that Nick Reiner built a life around exploiting the uncertainty his illness creates. And now his...
Nick Reiner built a life exploiting the uncertainty his illness creates. That's a great way to put it, and that does happen a lot. And the problem for people that really are like truly mentally ill or maybe even NGI is how do you distinguish the two? It can be difficult between what someone acting like they're insane versus someone who is insane. It can get tricky.
Freedom depends on people believing him. People who have no reason to believe anything he says. If you don't understand schizoaffective disorder, the conspiracy claim sounds like a cartoon of mental illness, like something a bad screenwriter would put in a movie to signal that a character is crazy. But that's not how psychosis actually works, and dismissing it that easily lets everyone off the hook. Schizoaffective disorder is a brutal diagnosis. It combines features of schizophrenia, delusions, hallucinations, disordered thinking, with severe mood episodes, mania, depression, often both, cycling unpredictably. And one of the core features of the psychotic component is a fundamental breakdown in how the brain processes cause and effect. Here's what that means.
So, Sam, that's a good question. How do you tell the difference? There are certain things that unconsciously the insane people who truly are insane will do that someone who is only faking it or pretending will not. So I've seen some confession videos, for example, where there was this guy that they said he could have gotten off on NGI, and he just flat out admitted what he did, and with no emotion, no nothing, and it was just like, okay, I just did this. And the detective was like, you do understand you did something terrible, right? And he was like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. And he just had, it was wild to see. So there's little clues that I think that would give it away.
In practice, a person in active psychosis can know a fact without integrating what that fact means. Nick can know he killed his parents in the same way you know your birthday. It's information stored in his brain. But the connection between that fact and his current circumstances might not compute. To a brain working correctly, I killed my parents leads directly to, therefore, I'm in jail for murder. To a brain in psychosis, those might feel like two completely unrelated data points. The jail part needs an explanation. And when your brain is generating paranoid delusions, it will create one. Conspiracy. This isn't stupidity. It's not denial in the way we usually use that word. It's a neurological misfire that makes the internal experience of psychosis genuinely terrifying and genuinely disorienting. And if TMZ and the reporting is accurate, that Nick's medications were changed about a month before the murders and still aren't working properly, then Nick may be sitting in a cell right now experiencing active psychosis, which means his current statements might reflect genuine delusion, not strategy.
So a question I would have is, I'm not sure I know the answer to this, but at Twin Towers, do they continue him on any medication he was having previously? Is there like a rule where, yes, until you're actually convicted, you need to be getting the same mental health care, which means taking the same meds you were before? I don't know. And I bet you there's probably limits to that because say maybe you're on a prescription painkiller, an opioid, or benzos. I mean, I have a hard time believing they're going to give you that in an institution like this, but I might be wrong. There might be exceptions. But what do you think, chat? Will he continue getting that same medication? Or do they say, no, cold turkey?
Maybe. To someone in that state, external persecution isn't a theory to be evaluated. It's a felt reality. The same way, fire is hot without having the reason to touch it. Nick may know with absolute cellular certainty that people are conspiring against him. You can't argue someone out of that. You can't logic them into seeing reality. The medicine, or the machine rather, of that process and that logic.
And I think Sam makes a good point in the chat. What would happen first is the prison or wherever he is, the Twin Towers, they're going to do their own examination first. And they're going to say, okay, what do we think? We're going to do what we think is best because we can't necessarily trust all of their doctors. Why? Because some people might lie to their doctors. And again, if it's going to be a scheduled drug, a drug of abuse, they're going to have to be even more careful of what they give that person.
In that brain, it's broken. And here's the uncomfortable part. If that's true, if Nick is genuinely disconnected, then he might actually meet the legal standard for insanity. Not because he didn't know killing was wrong in some abstract sense, but because he cannot understand the nature and quality of what he did. He cannot connect the act to the consequence, and the law, however imperfectly, recognizes that some people are too sick to be held fully responsible. That's essentially what you get when we're talking about Alan Jackson saying under California law, he's not guilty of murder. It's a real thing that happens. And it might be happening here.
This is the most I've ever heard Tony Bruschi concede on this point. Previously, I'd always heard him say, no, that's not going to be a thing. But here, he's almost conceding that it's a possibility. This is the most I've heard him concede.
But Nick Reiner isn't just a man with a diagnosis. He's a man with a pattern. And the pattern is what makes him so impossible. The cycle reportedly went like this: crisis, intervention, treatment, stabilization, promises, relapse, destruction, repeat. To get that? Crisis, intervention, treatment, stabilization, promises, relapse, destruction, repeat. The Reiners spent enormous sums, by some accounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars on every form of help money could buy: rehabs, inpatient facilities, outpatient programs, specialists, lawyers, interventions, the best of the best. Nick went through at least 18 rehab stays before the age of 30, and every single time he stabilized. According to those who knew the family, the same thing happened. He gained just enough control to start working the system again. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Mental illness and manipulation are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist in the same person, sometimes in the same moment. Nick, when stable, allegedly knew exactly how to leverage his diagnosis, how to present in a clinical setting, how to say the words that would get him released.
And this is what Dr. George Simon and I have gone over too, that there are certain people, they will leverage every little bit they can to get more of what they want and to get favorable outcomes, right? And some people don't want to think it's possible. No, people wouldn't do that. But depending on their lack of remorse, their lack of shame, their shamelessness, their lack of empathy, they'll do any number of things. And sometimes there's no lie too big for them to tell.
How to extract money and resources from people who loved him, how to make promises he had no intention of keeping. Rob Reiner himself admitted that experts repeatedly told the family Nick was lying or manipulating them, and they believed it, sometimes when they shouldn't have. And then there's the drugs. Addiction makes everything murkier. Substances can trigger psychosis in people who are already vulnerable. They can also provide a convenient excuse for behavior that was entirely voluntary. When Nick was using, he was sick, or was he sick, or was he choosing?
Danielle, you reminded me, you're going to make me say the cornball joke. The cornball joke is, here I sit brokenhearted, tried to shit but only farted. Or the other one is, love is like a fart. If you have to force it, it's probably shit. You made me do it, Danielle. I'm blaming you.
He sobered up. Was he recovered, or was he calculating his next move? Those questions don't have clean answers. They have years of exhausted family members trying to figure out who they were actually talking to at any given moment. Eventually, allegedly, Rob and Michelle Reiner reached a point where they couldn't tell the difference anymore, where every conversation with their son required a mental calculation. Is this real? Is this the manipulation? Is he having an episode, or is he running a play? That's not a failure of love. That's what years of this cycle does to a family. It poisons the ability to trust, even when trust might be warranted. It makes every interaction a guessing game. And it's exhausting in a way that people who haven't lived it cannot fully understand. This is the psychological tightrope everyone around Nick Reiner has been walking for years. And now 12 strangers are going to have to walk it too at some point if this ever gets to trial. When someone has lied and manipulated and exploited their illness for years, allegedly by documented accounts, how does anyone determine what's real? How do you know when the person in front of you is genuinely sick versus strategically deploying the appearance of sickness? The Reiners couldn't figure it out. Teams of professionals couldn't figure it out. Years of treatment and evaluation couldn't produce a consistent answer. And now the court, judge, jury at some point supposed to do what everyone else failed to do? The insanity defense in California doesn't require proving that Nick didn't know right from wrong. That's a common misconception. It requires proving he didn't
The nature and quality.
understand the nature and quality of his actions. A man who says, I killed them, but me being in jail is a conspiracy might genuinely meet that standard.
But it shouldn't be that low, because anyone can say that. Anyone can say, oh, it's just a conspiracy. In fact, you better believe there's a lot of people who do say that in jail that absolutely get convicted. So I wouldn't buy that. And again, I think the best thing to do in the past is to get clean from substances first. Clean from substances, then work on your med routine. And looking back at this here, this switching up of the meds, if that's truly what happened because he was upset with the weight gain, and maybe there's sexual side effects too, but if that's really what it was, that's very disappointing. That he was stabilized for 5 years, and then because of that, he tries to switch it up, and then he just never gets back on the right track. That's just, that can't happen. That can't happen to me.
Might be living proof of a broken brain unable to connect cause to effect, or he might be performing the exact role his defense needs him to play because he's smart enough to know what that role is. Here's the cruelest part. Both can be true, very true, simultaneously. Nick can be genuinely psychotic right now and be instinctively falling into manipulative patterns that have served him his whole life. Mental illness doesn't erase learned behavior. It just makes it harder to untangle, especially if that's your MO.
And all of this is what the prosecution is going to have to untangle, right? Like, okay, what's mental illness? What's learned behavior? What's the manipulation? What's the deceit? What's a personality disorder? It can be a jarbled mess. But I think if you're a prosecution and if you're just trying to keep people safe in general, maybe you're a politician or you're a judge. In order to keep people safe, you have to lean towards accountability more so than the other way. Just for other people's safety, I think that's required.
Your motor runs on manipulation? Yeah. It's going to keep running on manipulation. Now shift the lens, because this TMZ story didn't happen by accident. Sources with direct knowledge leaked this information. Somebody wanted this narrative in the public sphere. Somebody wanted potential jurors, and there are potential jurors out there right now watching and listening to this to absorb the idea that Nick Reiner is so disconnected from reality that.
But here's the thing I would say. Yeah, med changes can be certainly dangerous. However, if he was truly stable on those other meds, and you see things are going off the rails, what then is the logical thing to do? Go back on the meds that were working for 5 years. right? That's the logical thing to do so you can get the baseline again. And if you want to try a different med from there, okay. But if it's not going well, the fact that you know something that's working and you can go back to that, that's a very important thing. But it doesn't seem like that's what they did.
He doesn't understand why he's incarcerated. Yeah. It's not journalism. It's jury pool cultivation when you're feeding this story out there. I don't fault TMZ for reporting it, just like we're talking about it here. But that's why we need to talk about it and not just consume it and say, see? Because when that's done, it can be effective. Every person who reads that headline and thinks, wow, he must really be sick, carries that impression forward into conversations, into social media, eventually into a courtroom if they're called for jury duty. And the defense doesn't need to convince people Nick is insane. They just need to paint enough doubt that he might be. And this story does that work beautifully. Alan Jackson, the high-profile defense attorney, withdrew from the case on January 7th. Nick now has a public defender, but whoever ends up defending him, this story serves the insanity strategy perfectly. It softens the ground. It creates a baseline assumption that Nick is too broken to be fully responsible. And the cruel irony is that this is the same pattern that defined Nick's entire life. Using his illness or the appearance of it strategically, whether Nick is genuinely delusional or actively shaping the narrative, the outcome is identical. The story that helps him is now in the press, and we cannot know which version is true. Maybe Nick Reiner is lost. Maybe he's in a jail cell right now experiencing a reality that none of us can access, genuinely unable to understand how he got there. Schizoaffective disorder is a devastating illness. And there are people, many of them, who commit acts inside.
So GLP-1s, Ozempic. I mean, here's the thing. We have to believe that that truly is what was going on. Like he wanted to stop for weight gain purposes. Maybe it was more sexual side effects. What would Ozempic do for sexual side effects? Maybe not much. But again, we have to trust that he was telling the truth. Do we know that? No. Do we know what med he tried to switch from? No. Do we know what med he tried to switch to? No. Do we know if he was using substances like meth? No. There's just so many things we don't know. And so, but again, my point was before, if you have something that's working, even if it has some undesirable side effects, it's better than going completely off the rocker, and you can always go back to what worked. But apparently he didn't.
Psychotic states that they would never commit if their brains were functioning properly. The legal system has an insanity defense for a reason. Some people really are too sick to be held responsible. But Nick also has a decades-long history of allegedly burning every person in every system that tried to help him. He has a pattern of stabilizing, manipulating, promising, destroying, and repeating. The night before the murders, he was allegedly so disruptive at a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien, getting into a heated argument with his father after behaving erratically around other guests. And now he's sitting in jail, either genuinely lost in delusion.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Danielle. The I'm going to do a favor to the truth. One of my new favorite expressions.
Or performing the most important role of his life. Maybe it's not either or. Maybe it's both. Maybe after years of blurring the lines between symptom and strategy, even Nick doesn't know which it is anymore. Maybe that line never existed clearly in the first place. The brain doesn't compartmentalize as cleanly as we'd like. Illness and intent and learned behavior bleed into each other, and teasing them apart isn't always possible. Even with the best clinical tools, even with years of observation, even with unlimited resources. The Reiners tried. They had the money, they had the access, they had the experts, and they still ended up dead. Allegedly at the hands of the son they couldn't figure out. Nick Reiner spent years making it impossible for anyone to trust him. He burned his family. He burned clinicians. He burned every system that tried to intervene. He took help and rejected help and took it again and weaponized it allegedly over and over and over. And now the system when his life depends on being believed, he's asking it to do what his own parents couldn't, to look at him and to see the truth, to know somehow whether he's a broken man who couldn't control what his brain made him do, or a manipulator running the longest con of his life. Maybe he's...
That's an interesting question, Sam. Do you think if Nick had not gone to the party, things would be different? I think he probably wouldn't have done it that night, but it might have just been delaying the inevitable at that point too. Or maybe he makes a different decision and he goes back on the meds that previously stabilized him, and the whole thing's avoided, and we're not talking about it right now. So in terms of it occurring that night, I do think the party was a key element in it happening that night, but that doesn't mean it wasn't going to happen in the near future either, right? That could always be as well. But now we'll just never know. We'll never know. I do think it was a mistake for Rob to even bring him, considering everything that was going on. But I think Rob was probably thinking, oh, remember, Nick has said he doesn't want to feel left out. He wants to feel a part of, so let's invite him to this party. I wouldn't have done it.
Genuinely lost in psychosis. Maybe he's executing a defense strategy, consciously or unconsciously. Maybe it's both. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore because the result is the same. Nobody knows. But here's the thing. If nobody can tell the difference between Nick Reiner's genuine illness and Nick Reiner's strategic manipulation, that's not the system failing him. That's his legacy catching up with him. Give me your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube. Search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi, or on our Substack. You can interact directly with us on our Substack. The link is in the description. It's hiddenkillers.substack.com, and it's absolutely free right now to join. There you actually get access to our reporting and our videos and our monologues and our interviews a day before they go public everywhere else. And it's free. Check it out right now. hiddenkillers.substack.com. And please do press subscribe wherever it is that you are normally watching us, whether it be Apple Podcast, YouTube, whatever it is. Hit subscribe for you right here. So please, we do appreciate that review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, my name is...
And Todd Mike.
But couldn't quite articulate. Sources with direct knowledge now saying Nick Reiner admits to killing his parents, but reportedly doesn't understand why he's in jail. He allegedly believes his incarceration is part of a conspiracy against him. Meanwhile, the murder weapon still hasn't been found. The autopsy reports have been sealed by the LAPD, and legal experts are predicting this case won't see a courtroom for at least 2.
Now, I don't know if he let that slip here, but he says a murder weapon has still not been found. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if the district attorney and the prosecution truly has found it, but they just said that they're not going to present it until court. So I don't know if Tony's correct about that.
2 years to help us understand what investigators are dealing with right now and what the behavioral evidence actually tells us. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent, is with us. Jen, welcome. Happy new week here.
Where have we seen Jennifer Coffindaffer before? Was she also on Ashley Banfield? Is that where we saw her? I like saying her name, Jennifer Coffindaffer. Although I'm a little partial towards Maureen, I must say. I know Danielle is too.
Let's start with the admission itself. Sources say Nick knows he killed his parents, but believes the people who put him behind bars are engaged in a conspiracy against him. I'm curious as to what your take is on this. Is this someone, with obviously mental illness is real, but he also has a track record of manipulating anyone and everyone around him to get them to look at him in a certain light? What do you think we're dealing with right now that he's behind bars?
You know exactly, Tony. First of all, anyone who is an addict of this degree lives their life in a complete lie. So every time they open their mouth, it's very difficult to know what is truth and what is false. And typically, it's a lot of false. Secondarily to that, I want to see the whole statement. I know this is source information, blah, blah. But if he gave some sort of a confession of sorts, it's going to be very, very involved. It's not just going to be a sentence or two. And I would love to see the full context.
Can we see it? Is it available somewhere?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah. What exactly is going on in the investigations from an investigative standpoint right now? I mean, obviously, it seems pretty clear cut that he did this. Allegedly, he's admitting to it. So, I mean, that's fairly established. I mean, you can, I'm sure, find, and they are finding a lot of, ring camera videos, security camera videos of him wandering the streets, trying to put together that timeline of what happened between the party and that night and him being back at the house and the murders and all of that and him being arrested. Great. But at the end of the day, if he says he did it, what sort of investigative points are really being made here or will be made by whatever they're finding, if at the end of the day this all kind of comes down to more of a mental health defense and mental health principles, not so much were you the one that did it?
Right. I love how you couch that, because of course they're going to be looking at the A to Z in terms of that actual time leading up to the crime and after the crime, in terms of the steps he took physically, right? And that's what you're talking about. But what's the bigger picture? The real bigger picture that law enforcement is going to want to focus on is premeditation, what steps he took, where did he get the knife, when did he reserve the hotel room?
And all of that stuff is going to be, it's going to make it very difficult for him to get NGI. There's just too many things. There's too many things that show, yeah, he just knew. He knew, and he knew the nature and quality too, right? I think, like, did he get that hotel room in advance? I don't think we know for sure, but I think there's evidence he did. And then just doing everything he did afterwards. And some people were questioning me about having the videos in Rob Reiner's home. So I think there's security cameras probably in every room. Now, some people said, what do you think? They're going to be pointed at the bed? And I would say, you never know. You never know. There could be some. I mean, how often are you going to think that your security footage is going to be played, right? Only in an event like this will it even be played, or a break-in of sorts, right? But I would imagine there's probably something. There's certainly evidence of him on a camera somewhere in that house. Now, maybe it's not with the exact evidence of what he did, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was either.
How long has he been thinking about committing this crime? What is his footprint from his digital evidence? Is
correct, Jennifer. And thank you very much for this, Farley. Nick feels calculated, not impulsive, and he's loving being the center of it. He thinks getting off, and he chose this because he saw no other future. He thinks he's getting off. He might think that. He might be so used to getting his way and entitled that he might think he'll be able to get off with an NGI. But I think he's going to be in for a rude awakening, is what I think. And did he choose this because he saw no other future? I'm not exactly sure why he chose it. Is it just bitterness, resentfulness, enviousness, personality disorder? All of it combined? Hopelessness? More of like a fuck it mentality? I think it's true that all of that comes into play. That's what I think. Thank you again, Farley.
Far as researching anything about committing such a murder. And then afterwards, what did he do to cover it up? We know he went to a hotel room. We know he took a shower. We know the knife is nowhere to be found. Those are indications of him understanding right from wrong. If he would have been caught sitting on the front porch, with knife in hand going, I don't know really what happened. That's a big difference from covering up a crime. That's what they're going to concentrate on.
And that's consciousness of guilt. That's what we've been hearing everybody talk about. That's what you're alluding to, correct?
Yeah, consciousness of guilt. Did he understand, more importantly, not just consciousness of guilt, but to expand, really understanding right from wrong and taking steps to cover it up. That's what law enforcement's going to be looking for.
Taking steps to cover it up. I guess that's the interesting part. I mean, do we have anything that looks like this is being covered up? Because from what we've seen thus far, showing up at the hotel, allegedly there was a lot of blood in the shower and such, and the hotel still said, got to get the room flipped, so let's clean it. Do we have anything that shows a cover up here, or do we just show someone who seems to have gone out and done this and doesn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation?
No, I think that shows cover up. Whenever you go someplace that is unusual, unless he always goes to that hotel on that particular evenings, on those particular nights, and has often frequented there, he changes clothes. Again, the knife is nowhere to be found. He leaves the murder location. All of those indicate cover up. But they're going to get into very specifics of all that. At least that's what they're going to look for. They're also going to look for his Google searches, as I mentioned. Did he Google how to get rid of a knife, how to clean blood out of clothes, how to clean up, after you commit murder? Those types of Google searches, it's possible we're going to see those.
And let's say they find.
And that's the big thing right there. It's a great point by her. What is his phone history? What is his messages? What is his Google searches? What are his ChatGPT or Claude searches? Whatever they are is going to be very telling. And depending on what they are, you'll be able to see some awareness of right and wrong and the nature and equality, and maybe premeditation. That's what I think. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
Them. But how much does that then play into the mental health area of this, where it's by reason of insanity? Because you can have people that are having a psychotic break, carrying out all of these things because they're at that moment in time not fully understanding the gravity of what they're doing. They can understand what they're doing is wrong, but if they don't fully grasp what that all means, that's where you get into the weird technicalities of an insanity defense. And, some may look at that and go, BS, but it is what it is. I mean, that's how they look at these sort of cases if they actually make it to trial.
The legal point on this is crystal clear. Did they know right from wrong? And how investigators show that one way or the other.
Not just right or wrong. Tony Bruschi said it, as did TMZ, the nature and the quality. You have to know that too. You might not know it's right or wrong. You can know it's right or wrong, but you might not know the nature or quality. There was a good comment someone made in one of my comment sections the other day that was really a good illustration of the difference between the two. I'll see if I can find it.
Is looking at premeditation combined with looking at cover-up. So if we get premeditation and cover-up, if they're able to show that, he's cooked.
What's your thoughts on, and I found this interesting in the TMZ doc that came out, the reason for the medication change. And medication changes, in case someone is unaware, they happen very frequently. In fact, most people, if you do have a long-term debilitating, whether it's a disease, whether it's a disorder, whether it's high blood pressure, whatever it may be, whatever med they put you on initially, eventually your body is going to say, not working so well anymore. And that does get changed over time for almost any ailment that one may be on a long-term plan for. But the reason in this case for switching the meds wasn't that. It wasn't, well, Nick's been on this for a long time, the liver's absorbing it, and it's not as effective as it used to be. It's more so he was gaining weight, allegedly. And that's the reason they decided, maybe we should switch some meds up here, even though you're in a nice, stable place compared to the hellscape that you've been in. But oh, you're putting on those extra pounds. I get it. People make this choice all the time on medications because of weight gain. But at the same point, I mean, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback it and look back and go, well, that was a bad idea. He should have just dealt with it. But at the same point, what is your reaction to that new piece of information that's come out?
Well, Tony, this guy, Nick Reiner, is probably one of the cases of the most spoiled and entitled individuals that I've ever seen. When I watch his own words coming out of his mouth, when I've tried to grab a hold of everything I can to get a feel for Nick Reiner, and then watching all of his actions throughout his life. Look, he controlled everything. And whatever he wanted done, he snapped his fingers. And he snapped his fingers on this one. Oh, I'm getting a little fat. Can you please change my medication? Look at the amount of money they were paying monthly for his care. So basically, whatever he wanted, he was going to get. And we saw him manipulate that actually in a situation where they withheld meds. And then he started acting crazy and threw a rock out a window. This is a manipulating addict who wants his way, and if he doesn't get it, he does what it takes to get it. And that's my opinion on Nick Reiner overall.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the reality of so many addicts. They will do, I mean, the addiction will win unless it's treated and unless the person who has it wants to actively participate in their recovery. A big detail that is standing out in this yet, and I don't know how much weight it has in this case. In a lot of cases, it's usually a big deal, but this one, some sources say it's of limited investigative value. I'm of course talking about the murder weapon has not yet been found. How important is it that the murder weapon?
How does he keep on saying this? How does he know? The district attorney specifically said, we're not releasing that information. Is he going by the fact that they just haven't come out and announced they did? So since they're not coming out to announce they did, it means they mustn't have? I don't know what he's talking about with this. I mean, to me, maybe they did. I mean, they specifically said, we're not going to say. Now, maybe if you look into the history of what district attorneys and prosecutors say in their offices, maybe they only say that when they haven't found it. Maybe. That's a charitable interpretation, though. But I think it's possible they might have. Or do they think, well, it's going to be newsworthy, so they're going to put it out there if they did? Is that what Tony thinks?
Is recovered in this case.
Well, I can't agree on that one with the LAPD. Look, when you get the murder weapon, that's critical. It's amazing because, first of all, you're going to have likely or possibly, I should say, DNA or fingerprints on that weapon itself. So that's really important for the investigation. Also, when you find the location it was ditched at, that's important too. It can show, in this case, cover up. If he went and buried it someplace, gave it to a friend, put it in a place that only he's familiar with, all of that helps with the cover up portion that we spoke about earlier, Tony. So to say it's really not that important, I just can't agree with that.
Does it hold any bearing though on convicting him? I mean, I guess if he's admitted to doing it, what does it matter if they have it or whether he threw it in the dumpster at a 7-Eleven as he was wandering around the streets?
Look, we've got the meat and potatoes. Yeah. I agree with what happened, but man, it is nice to have dessert.
Yeah.
And dessert is that knife.
Yeah. I've never heard that analogy before. It's nice to have dessert, and dessert is that knife. Wow. You could put that into some sort of BDSM thing there too. Or as Deftones would say, she calls it, or Deftones has a song called Knife Party.
Yeah, you want your toppings on your dessert sundae. I feel like it's the toppings. I feel like it's, it's the M&Ms or the sprinkles or whatever. And it's not quite a complete sundae without it, but it's still a sundae, and it can still be satisfied. We have multiple people saying that there was a lot of welfare checks at the Reiner home over the years involving Nick, where, law enforcement literally came to the door. Hey, we want to make sure everybody's okay. From an investigative standpoint, and then we get into the legal aspect of this once we get to court. I mean, how valuable are those prior incident reports going to be for the prosecution or the defense in establishing a pattern of behavior in some way, shape, or form?
Well, certainly it's a double-edged sword. And I think in many cases they can be used just as that. The defense will sort of twist it to show this continued pattern of, incompetency and mental illness and struggling. And the prosecution will say, see, this guy is a wreck. He was, had violent incidents. He had incidents of where police had to respond, and it was building until this is what it culminated in. So I see it going either way, depending on your slant.
Just out of curiosity, do you think that there was something that the Reiners were planning on doing, that his parents were maybe going to start withholding the money or kick him out or have him?
That's a very good question. One I don't even think I've addressed yet. Were Rob and Michelle about to do something a little more drastic in terms of consequences or withholding money? What do you think, chat?
Committed, maybe, and as a motive that, okay, they're going to pull the rug out from underneath me. This is what's going to happen. Or do you think he just snapped? I mean, what's your gut tell you?
Well, not really going from my gut, Stacy, but really going from experience. There is almost always what I call a proximal event. Some event that happened. We know the party at the O'Brien's, but what happened after? And I truly believe there was some heated talk, heated discussion. Maybe we're going to cut you off. Maybe we're just done, Nick. You're back on the streets. We don't know. But there was a proximal event. I think that was it. What exactly was said, it might come out. Look, in the digital footprint, I mean, Nick might have, texted his sister or texted somebody he's close to and said, oh my God, they're going to throw me out again. We're going to see a lot more depending on what they're able to pull from that. And I'll tell you what, if he decided to wipe his phone or delete some of that.
And regardless of what consequence they might have tried to pull or withholding money, it shouldn't have been a death sentence. I mean, that should go without saying, but it was not that bad. Whatever consequence was not worthy of a death sentence.
That's another beautiful, beautiful piece of evidence the investigators are going to want to show.
What if he didn't wipe his phone? What if everything's there? Does that show incompetence?
Not really, because a lot of people in a moment like that, he's never committed a double homicide. Most people haven't, and they make mistakes. They don't clean well enough. They, decide to book a hotel and wash off there. They make so many mistakes. They're seen on camera. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that he wouldn't have. I just don't know how really bright Nick Reiner really is when it comes to thinking about the steps to cover up.
Death penalty is on the table as of right now. We don't know exactly. Some sources say the family, the surviving members are not for it. If one were to make an educated guess based on their previous stances on situations, one would guess they're probably not for the death penalty. But that doesn't mean they're not for having him face consequences and be locked away for the rest of his life. But it is.
And I would doubt that Jake and Romy want the death penalty for Nick, especially considering their parents' stance, and especially considering their parents befriended convicted murderers. And I think just at the very least, to honor their parents' memory, they wouldn't want to push for something they were against. That's what I would think.
Still on the table. The state may want the death penalty. Where do you think that's going to go? And how much weight do you think the decision-making process is going to put on the surviving family member's opinion versus what the state wants to ultimately do here?
Well, first of all, it's critical to understand what state we're dealing with, which is California. And California has a moratorium on the death, on using the death penalty. So with that being said, Tony, it's sort of a moot determination, in my opinion. I don't think the death penalty is going to be exercised or is coming back anytime soon to California. But can it be used as a bargaining chip? I think that's the only reason it's on the table. This case should be pled out. That's my opinion. The evidence is overwhelming. They should get rid of the death penalty, lock this guy up for the rest of his life in prison, and he can make his, medication in the toilet like everybody else does that's an addict that goes into prison. Wow, I'm spicy today.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, in a prison or a mental health facility for the rest of his life, one of the two. I mean, neither are pleasant. If anyone thinks that, like, the mental type health facility that he would be going to in a state facility is anything like the, passages of Malibu or wherever the hell he is.
I would say, though, if most had a place where they would want to go, most would probably choose a mental institution over maximum security prison. That doesn't mean that it's a freaking 5-star Marriott at the mental institution, but it's still probably better than prison.
Gone on and I'm just throwing random ones out there that I know the names of, that are, more resorts seemingly than actual treatment facilities. That's not where he would end up. Both can be very brutal places. Both can be very dangerous as well. As far as where he ends up, that's the question. I do want to go back just for a second, because we're talking about, where his parents sitting there going and saying, okay, back to the streets. Good luck. We're done. We're withdrawing our support. I'm wondering if that was it. I almost think if you're the addict, you may be going, all right, carte blanche to use again, and nobody's going to stop me. Or is it more, as we've heard rumors of, were they getting ready to execute a conservatorship? There had been talk of that, allegedly, that they were really seriously contemplating that. And I'm wondering, if you're the addict and your supply is not only getting cut off, not only your autonomy, your allowance, your access to whatever you're going to get outside of your parents' home, but a conservatorship where you may be institutionalized somewhere because they have the power and authority to do so. That's a powerful thing to put in front of an addict like that. And
so when Romy finds them, though, don't you think she's going to go into like a shock and have like PTSD from the event? It's interesting to me how some people will jump straight to the least charitable interpretation of what any kind of time gap was. It's probably like a massive shock to run into your parents murdered, right?
Someone who's mentally ill, where the one thing they want more than anything is to find that next fix. That seems like that could be a real tipping point for an individual of Nick's ilk, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you here, Tony, because certainly that was purportedly discussed. And was that discussed that night after that party? I don't know how much they would tip their hand. And I only say it because
it's total speculation to say that. We have no idea if Nick was blackmailing his parents.
Because of this, anybody who was getting legal advice about this type of a situation, a conservatorship, would be told, you don't want to discuss this with Nick. Mm-hmm. You do not want to set him off with what your plans are. But nevertheless, in a heat of the moment, after having an embarrassing moment at the appointments, both people just, one humiliated, the other one humiliated, all of that. You never know what was said, and I would never want to truly speculate at what was said, but I believe it was the proximal event.
It makes you wonder, in the heat of it, because they do believe that Nick and Michelle were alive, or were awake or conscious when this all went down. They were allegedly in different rooms, and you can almost see it. You can almost see, you did this, this is why we want to do the conservatorship. This, I'm just pure speculation, but you can almost see this going on, and then something clicking in his mind going, well, that's the cutoff point of everything for me. And then it's fight or flight. And he chose the first option in that. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of questions, and we'll continue to watch this and see where it all goes. I got to ask you this because this happened after we talked last week. One more on this. Alan Jackson withdrawing from the case.
I mean, this is the definition of victim blaming right here. He couldn't recover because his family was under a cloud, a black one. I mean, he could leave. If you're given $10,000 a month, then you should leave. Then get out. Like, you got to be an adult and take responsibility for your mental health conditions and addiction.
Obviously, a lot of people are looking at it as a money situation. We don't know for sure exactly why it was. What is the coffin daffer opinion on why Alan Jackson is no longer part of this?
Money, money, money.
Yeah.
Look, he threw his hat in the ring because of fame, notoriety, all the reasons he represents Spacey and Weinstein, same type of situation. You know, this brought headlines. It's in his neck of the woods. It was the perfect one to get in on until, and this is the bigger point that I wanted to make. Why aren't there funds anymore? You know why? In my opinion, the family has also been made up to speed, at least to some degree, on evidence against him. And probably that confession. In other words, law enforcement, I believe in this case, would share a little bit more than they normally do. And I think they said, this is it for us. He's on his own. He'll have a public defender. Public defenders, by the way, are great. I tell you, if somebody I knew was in trouble, I would want to get one of the best public defenders way over private counsel.
I don't know why she'd say this. I mean, there's a reason why private counselors charge so much money. And it's because, like, they're better at what they do. I mean, if it wasn't true, then what are people paying for? Why are people paying an arm and a leg if they're not better at what they do? Why doesn't everyone just get a public defender if there is no benefit? I mean, I'll listen to an argument, but there's a reason why Johnny Cochran gets hired. There's a reason why Alan Jackson gets hired. There's a reason why Alan Dershowitz gets hired. Because they're good at what they do.
Because I'll tell you what, in my experience with private counsel, and I've had cases with 50 defendants and 48 defendants where they had the most high power attorneys that were in the state. And I tell you what, when I sat there in my room with all my discovery, all the boxes, open discovery is how I handled everything. They would come in the room and look everything over. And you know who I never saw? Were those private attorneys.
And we actually did some research on this, on a piece last week on this. Your odds of winning the case are much higher with a public defender than with a private attorney when it comes to a capital case in California. There's just a...
Well, here's the thing also. How many people that are being convicted of capital cases even have the money for a private? Not that many. I mean, any time where there'd be a capital offense. Now, this Michael McKee case, that's an example of one, right? So if Michael McKee were to hear this, he'd say, well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be paying for a lawyer. I should just get a public defender. But again, like, I'd like to see like the ins and outs of why that is, because it doesn't make much sense for that to be the case.
Much higher rate there, and it makes sense because they see more of it. They deal with this level of charge more frequently than a private attorney would. So if you have more reps in it, you would naturally probably do better. So yeah, it's not like he's getting a bad attorney here.
And that's a good point there by Tony. So just for the very fact that they have to deal with it more and they're getting more reps, that's a good point.
She has many years of experience. We'll see where this goes. If it ever even makes it to trial, we'll, of course, keep following it. Your thoughts in the comments section.
Want more on this case and others? Then.
So let's see the video they're even talking about here. Harvey the rabbit and friends.
For Justin Bieber.
Ugh.
There is increasing evidence that this may have been a meth murder. We went to the place where Nick Reiner was arrested.
What can you find out here? You can get meth, you can get whatever you're looking for, bro. Have you ever seen this guy, Rob Reiner's son? He does look familiar. He looks familiar?
Nick Reiner may have been on meth, and if he was at Exposition Park looking for drugs when he was arrested, that probably wasn't his first rodeo in that month.
So now these two are saying, pointing to a meth murder, which would contradict completely the NGI, I would say. Interesting.
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. We have spent the week doing a deep dive, an investigation into the Rob and Michelle Reiner murders. And we went to the place where Nick Reiner was arrested. There is increasing evidence that this may have been a meth murder. Let's start off, Mark, by playing the...
And Art makes a good point in the chat there where it's not even an option to get a public defender. Like, if you have the money, you can't get one. Like, you have to prove you don't even have the money to get one. So, again, so you have the money, you're going to have to get a private person, period.
The interview that one of our people did with somebody who is well acquainted with the area where Nick Reiner was arrested, Exposition Park.
Is this the place that people come if they're looking for that? Like,
every drug activity over here every night.
Every night?
Yeah, driving around here.
Now, Exposition Park obviously is lined with like USC. It's the stadiums. It's the museums. That doesn't deter people.
It don't deter shit. You can find anything you're looking for.
Listen, I mean, where are people like actively like doing that, like grabbing that stuff? And does it make sense?
They doing it right now. You just gotta look around.
Like where? Like
it's cracking over here.
Over here by the freeway?
Yeah, right by the freeway. It's like slow down,
yeah.
So a lot of meth people become violent towards others, but I would not also be surprised that, especially during crashes, or if it springs people into manic depressive episodes, that they might end their own life or OD. That wouldn't surprise me either.
The encampments right there. And then what about by the school, like and the stadiums? Are they like on the other side?
That's everywhere, bro.
Everywhere. So at night it's a different world, is it?
Man, it's like Vegas at night around this place.
Really?
It's everything lit up.
Well, I mean, are people what can you find out here? I mean, there's like
whatever you're looking for, bro.
Specifically like meth. You can get meth, you can get
whatever you're looking for, bro.
So, and this is known. This is well known.
I'm not gonna say I know that it is.
Yeah.
You do whatever you're looking for.
Well, listen, man. Obviously, I'm curious. You know, have you ever seen this guy particularly? He was arrested.
Kind of ballsy of them to be interviewing this person and then putting him in the line of fire. I don't know if I approve of this.
A while back.
Right.
The Rob Reiner's son. I don't know if you heard the story, but big tragedy.
He does look familiar.
He looks familiar. You might have seen him out here.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Listen, man. How dangerous is it out here? I'm thinking like a white.
Dangerous period. Like for anybody, it's not about color around here. It's like dangerous area.
Like a rich white kid. Is this what do you see that a lot? Like
everybody, but like.
What do I mean about putting this guy in the line of fire? I mean that when you talk to reporters, especially if you talk to the police, you could almost be viewed as like a snitch. Less true if you're talking to reporters, but even so, a lot of them are not going to want people talking to the press, anyone involved or drug dealing or gangs or whatever. Like, no, that's a big no-no. You don't talk to the cops, and you probably shouldn't be talking to the press either. That's what they're going to think, because loose lips sink ships is what they say.
Like to say all nationalities come around here.
Just because
everybody's welcome.
Just because they already know.
getting cracking right here. This is spot the big.
Thank you.
So, Mark, let's just kind of connect the dots here. Nick Reiner was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder around 2020. He was put on meds that stabilized him. Before that, he was heavy into drugs, including meth. When he went on the drugs for schizoaffective disorder, um, we're told he was not using illegal drugs. He was taking other prescription drugs that were creating problems, but not meth. That's what we were told. In the month before the murders, they changed his meds because he was complaining about weight gain from the meds he was on. They changed the meds. He went off the rails, and that ended a month later when he killed his.
So yes, finisher. So someone like Bubbles from The Wire. He's in the scene, but just as a user. But they definitely still considered him a snitch, right? The other people didn't know. Now, word on the block was they did know. Some people did know, but like if Marlo or Avon ever found out, that'd be the end of Bubbles, right? But so he was in it, but just as a user. So he was a useful informant for McNutty. That's what he was called, McNulty, McNutty, and Kima.
His parents. Now, the way he killed them, Mark, was so brutal. It was carnage. I mean, I'm not going to say what we were told, but it is awful, the condition those bodies were in. And we talked to Dr. Drew about this, and
And my two favorite Omar quotes are, "You must have me confused with the man who repeats himself," and "You come at the king, you best not miss."
also believes, and we can get into this, why Nick Reiner may have been on meth. And if he was at Exposition Park looking for drugs when he was arrested, that probably wasn't his first rodeo in that month. Here's what Drew said.
The kind of violence that was on display here, to me, still reads methamphetamine. I keep saying that over and over again. It's not enough to have decompensated schizoaffective. The level of the violence. And when he was picked up, it's worth trying to understand what part of town was he in? What was he doing there?
Yeah.
You know, was he near MacArthur Park?
It was
It was a drug den. It was a drug den.
Guess what? That didn't start that night. that didn't start.
Right.
That's probably he needed more and he went to get more. Probably. I don't have any direct knowledge of this, but it's methamphetamine is the drug of violence.
Well, like Drew is saying, probably, but when you start connecting the dots, Mark, you know, if he was going off the rails a month before the murders, he may well have been doing meth in, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before he ended up killing them.
Right. And if you've watched my show, that's what I've been saying, right? Like, we don't know. It seems like he very well could have been using drugs like meth and whatever else. We just don't know. And this is another point about mental illness. I made this point yesterday too. But whether someone's schizophrenic, on the spectrum, bipolar, like you can have any of those things, and they can also be comorbid with a personality disorder. Or you can just be an asshole, right? So just because you have one diagnosis doesn't mean it explains every bit of your behavior. So say you're autistic, you're on the spectrum. That doesn't mean everything you do is all explained because of your autism. No, you can also be an asshole. Same with someone who's schizophrenic. Just because you're schizophrenic doesn't mean everything you do is explained from your schizophrenia by your schizophrenia. No, you can also be an asshole. Same with bipolar disorder, same with anything. So I think that's important to remember, because when we say things like, oh, this person had this, and maybe they did a horrible thing. Oh, but not all autistic people do that. Not all schizophrenic people do that. Correct. Not all of them do. But just because not everyone does, doesn't mean it's impossible.
So for those who aren't in LA, what Drew just referred to, MacArthur Park.
Well,
which
it's
is over
exposition.
by-
It's Exposition Park.
Right. What he's referring to is his historical knowledge. MacArthur Park over there by Langer's Delicatessen used to be the kind of outdoor drug supermarket. It's now moved to Exposition Park, which is where you had the reporter that was out there pointing behind him.
Right.
And that's now, it's literally straight down Figueroa from where I'm sitting. That's now the outdoor drug supermarket. And what Drew is telling you historically, and I know 3 or 4 cases he and I have had intersections on where.
So that's the third step, right? So anyone can have a mental health thing and you can be an asshole. And then you sprinkle some drugs or alcohol in the mix and then you amplify it even more. So whatever you have already, drugs and alcohol are going to make it even more so. So just another thing to think about. And that's true for personality disorders, right? So you can have schizophrenia plus a personality disorder, but if you sprinkle some drugs and alcohol on top, now you've got a mess on your hands. And everything that's already there is going to be amplified and worse.
Parents, when they're trying to when their kids are in the midst of this and they're going out to these drug supermarkets, historically they would go to MacArthur Park to try and find their kids to get them off the street. This Exposition Park is now the successor to that. It's kind of like just playing whack-a-mole around town. And that is, I think, one of the great insights by him, that this level of violence, normally what happens is you see that people get suicidal. You see when they get the change of drugs that they act out in weird ways. This is when you combine the meth and you see these horrible outcomes like we have here. And by the way, to your point, I'm told by people in the ME's office that this was not just a brutal sling, but this was something the likes of which people in that office had never seen before.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, just awful. And I don't want to dwell on it, but just like nothing they had ever seen. Hardened professionals who saw this and were traumatized.
When we first broke the story on TMZ.com, we had spoken to a couple of people in law enforcement, and they were horrified. I mean, it was just a brutal, awful scene. And and look, he was off the rails with these meds. There's no question about it. But to reach the level of violence he did, that's why Drew, who has seen this, more times than anybody could imagine, he's saying he had to have something in his system. Now, I'm assuming, Mark, and you tell me, that when they arrested Nick, they would draw blood?
I can't imagine that they would not have done a blood draw because, look, they're doing an investigation.
So here's the thing with the med changes. Med changes can cause some very erratic behavior. Will it always cause violence? No, certainly not always. But is it possible? Nothing's impossible. But you add a med change plus a personality disorder plus being an asshole plus addiction such as methamphetamine, and now you've got a combination of things that makes it more likely that violence is a thing.
They want to know proactively, they being the DA's office, what was he under the influence of? They have to know that this was, I mean, anybody who picks up the file, and by the way, you've got a very able deputy DA who was assigned to it. He would have been involved for major crimes from the get-go. And he would have said, look, proactively, I want to know what was in the blood system. So if they do a blood draw, which I think they more likely than not that they did, it would show the levels.
And I'd be shocked if they didn't do a drug draw or a drug test when he was taken into custody. At the very least, for the prosecution's sake, right? You want to know what he's on. Because if he's under the influence of drugs or alcohol, way more difficult now to get an NGI. So for their own sake, they're going to want to do that.
of not just the prescribed drug if it had not metabolized out, but any illegal drug that was still there. Now, mind you, meth metabolizes very quickly. So there are a number of kinds of the conclusions you can draw. And depending on how long they waited to get the blood draw, that would also be an issue. Because if they went and booked first and then later did the blood draw, by that time they could have metabolized out.
So, we shouldn't minimize the impact that the change of meds had on Nick Reiner, because as we speak right now, he would be utterly incompetent to stand trial. We've both talked about that. He
Correct.
is.
And speaking of Paul Newman, what we've got here is a failure to communicate. And so with Nick, I think with the psych meds, they can measure the levels. I'm not sure how accurately they can measure the levels, though, and what that even looks like. They would have to have like measurements of people taking something as prescribed versus what the level of it in Nick's system is. And you have to wonder, is he taking it as prescribed? Could changing meds prompt a relapse? For sure. For sure. Though many things can prompt a relapse, right? Not just a med change.
Out of his head because they still haven't been able to figure out how to stabilize him with the meds. So it's not like this was just a meth killing. This was a guy whose meds were changed a month before the murder.
Well, I think they're making a big deal out of it, Gretchen, because it could possibly make or break the prosecution's case. If you can prove he was on meth, then I don't think you're going to be able to do any NGI. But if he's clean from drugs and completely passes a drug test, now that's a step in the right direction for an NGI. I'm not saying he's going to get it, but it's a step in the right direction for that.
And he just went into free fall. And it would seem, we don't know for sure, but as we try connecting these dots, especially him ending up at Exposition Park, like Drew said, that was not the first time he was there. And if meth fueled this, then, that would take him to the level of violence that you and I have both heard.
Well, and I will tell you this. I've talked to somebody who has interviewed him face to face at Twin Towers. And I will tell you that as recently in the last 5 days, that he is, at least when he was meeting with this person, he was in such a kind of a docile, just kind of puppy-like way about him, that he was, that literally was the almost complete opposite of the state of mind he would have had to have been to have committed this act. I am telling you that it was described to me as somebody who was almost toddler-like in where his state of mind was, and the incomprehension as to the act itself was almost incomprehensible to the person he was meeting with.
So that's interesting, because I was told by somebody who was in a similar position that he knew what he did, but he was so out of his head, he does not understand why he's in jail for it, that he thinks this is a conspiracy against him. I don't know if that aligns with what you're hearing.
It does, in the sense.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of narcissists, when they're held accountable, they think that's a conspiracy. Why? Because they want to add to the dark tetrad paranoia, right? So the dark tetrad is narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and sadism, but they want to add the fifth one, paranoia. And it's like I've made the joke in the past that being held accountable, a narcissist can feel like they're going through a really hard time when it's really just consequences for their own actions. Doesn't mean anything like they're insane. It just means they want to avoid accountability at all costs.
That it's almost like the way he was being described is kind of like this childlike naivete, kind of divorced from the reality of the situation, to a point that kept describing as kind of puppy and childlike in just, and your description would fit with that in terms of this, like, it must be a conspiracy because I could not have done this willingly, intentionally, or in my own mind. Now, I'm not, I'm not, it's not at a level where I'm going to diagnose it, but I think one of the things, having dealt with Drew and talked to Drew over the years on many of these kinds of cases, there is this phenomena that happens with the prescription drugs for the disorder, the mental disorder.
So someone in the chat said that he knew someone that was made normal by meth, and to which I would say maybe temporarily that could be a thing. In particular, if they're self-medicating an ADHD, okay, that might appear to level them out at first. But generally speaking, you don't really see too many long-term meth success stories. Now, having a prescription for Adderall maybe, or Vyvanse, strictly used as prescribed, maybe that's a different story. But I could see that being the case if someone has an ADHD or something like that. It could be possible temporarily,
where the person who's taking them starts to feel like they're slowed down, like they're in molasses, like they're in a gray area or a fog, and they react to that. Now, you did, and DMZ did some reporting about, he was very concerned about the weight gain.
Right.
That's something I've seen before. I've seen that before, where they just feel like they've slowed down, like the metabolism is slowed down, like they're in a quagmire. And so then the reaction to that is kind of a meth, something to get them up, something to do that kind of pendulum swing that psychosis gets them into. And if that's the case, and interestingly, if this guy that you interviewed or the TMZ interviewed actually saw him down there, that also supports what Drew was saying about this was not the first rodeo. And by the way, you would have to know what you're doing to go down to Exposition
At
Park
night.
At night. I mean, that place is wild.
Well, we should also say that he had used, and we broke this story about him going from the house where the Reiners were murdered to a Santa Monica hotel. Santa Monica is on the complete opposite side of the city as Exposition Park. So it is a long drive, and you don't go there accidentally.
No, it's not like you're going from UCLA to USC to visit people in the fraternity. I mean, it is a known, like I said, when MacArthur Park kind of got cleaned up, it popped up down by Exposition Park, which is where this interview was, which is where this outdoor drug marketplace is, which is like I said, when he describes it as Vegas, it does have that atmosphere. It's an outdoor circus.
So, look, the New York Times found out that Nick Reiner was placed in a conservatorship in 2020. Interestingly, that's the pandemic year. And this all had to do with mental health. So it aligns with everything we knew, because that was the same time period where he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. We know that. So it seems like they got him diagnosed because he was going off the rails. So I think it's undeniable at this point that Nick Reiner has a severe mental illness, and that the change in meds sent him into a spiral. I think that's those are undeniable facts right now. We know that. We've researched that. We've investigated that. It's simply true.
But how do you know? How do they know? How do they know that it wasn't a relapse that triggered all of this first? How do they know? I don't think they do know. What do you think, chat?
The question is this, that his...
And this is the other reason why I think it could also have been a relapse too. All right, well, he thinks that he doesn't like the weight gain from the medicine. So he thinks to himself, And this could be his addiction talking too. Ah, you know what else helps weight gain? The old methamphetamine diet. So maybe I can take my meds, but then I'll also take some meth. Oh, and guess what? I'll lose some weight. Is that beyond the realm of possibility for an addict? No, I don't think so at all. I think that's possible. Now, is it possible he stopped the meds first and just simply tried to switch meds? Yeah, that's possible too. And then took drugs on top of that? Yeah, that's possible too. Like, we just don't know.
Option to me is only not guilty by reason of insanity, NGI. And because he's not going to plead not guilty because there is so much evidence that he did it. So if he pleads not guilty by reason of insanity, and it turns out that, yeah, all of that's true, that Nick Reiner does have schizoaffective disorder. Nick Reiner's meds were changed. It sent him into a spiral. But if you add on to that he then started using meth, what does that do to the NGI defense?
Well, it's interesting because the way procedurally they would enter a plea, presumably, if they get past the competency issue, both not guilty
Right.
by reason of insanity, they do the bifurcated proceedings. But what it does is it's almost a law school or bar exam question, because the voluntary use of drugs will only get you so far. You voluntarily ingest. That doesn't give you a free pass.
It's like a drunk driver. You can't say, well, I was drunk and that's why I crashed.
Right.
Correct. But let's hear what his however is here. His but.
That doesn't negate the appropriate mens rea or the mental state. However, in this case, what makes it so nuanced and legally complex, if you will, is what came first? Was it the change of drugs? Was the prescription medication the change or the tinkering with the medication? Did that cause him to then, in reaction to that, try to self-medicate? And was this one of the side effects?
And to me, that wouldn't change it. I mean, if you self-medicate, even though you're switching meds, and then you do that, it's like, you have to know what you're taking meds for. If you know you're taking meds for schizoaffective, if that's truly what he had, then you have to know, well, meth isn't going to help my schizoaffective, right? That's where the responsibility and accountability comes in. But if you can say in the eyes of the law, oh, I switched meds, so that makes it okay for me to go do meth because now I'm just self-medicating, and then that means that I'm no longer held responsible for my actions, I can't buy that. I can't find that to be an acceptable excuse. But what do you think, chat?
That they had not calibrated when they did the change. Because when you have this, you put it in a timeline, you've got a conservatorship in 2020, and you'd be amazed at how many people finally in 2020, parents especially, and I've got some anecdotal experience with that, actually went and tried to get conservatorships on their kids because it was such a frightening dystopian time to begin with, and then you combine it with what was happening to mental health. Well, if there is that, and if they documented, and it appears from everything you've reported, they have documented the change in the drug use. The self-medication could be a side effect to try to course correct, and boy, did this course correct just get out of control in the worst way imaginable, a parade of horribles that you can't even almost fathom at a certain point. And legally, how do you, the first thing as a lawyer how do you even fashion a jury instruction that can be given to lay people to try to parse out a mental state in terms of this chicken and egg of the ingestion of the drugs?
Well, for me.
And so what these two are doing here is pretty tricky because they're making a lot of presumptions, but they're acting like it's already settled fact. Like a presumption is, oh, he was on these stabilized meds and he was doing great. Another presumption is, Well, he definitely wanted to stop taking them for the weight gain, and then he did something from there. But again, like, do we know? Do we know that any of that? I saw it's all just hearsay, right? It's all hearsay from the case.
You know, what Nick Reiner has going for him, I think, is kind of a failure on the part of the mental health system. That, to change his drugs because of weight gain, I get it. That people, want to live their life and all, and there are two very common side effects, which are erectile dysfunction and weight gain for men. And so doctors know that, but the idea that he was basically in free fall, nobody seemed to try to put him under some kind of psych hold, a 5150, where they could hold him for up to 14 days and at least try and stabilize him. If he is going into that spiral and the doctors are not putting him in a safe place, a safe for him and for his parents, and they're letting this thing cascade, it's not unforeseeable that he is going to use what a lot of people under those circumstances use, which you just mentioned, which is self-medicating to try and dim the noise, and use meth, which he had done in the past. And it's not an unusual thing for people with that kind of disorder to use. So if you want to talk about chicken egg, it seems like what came first is,
Yes, people, remember to like the video if you haven't liked it already, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you.
the change of meds, and the consequence of that was meth. So, that's the best argument for saying the not guilty by reason of insanity defense is intact, because it all triggered with the change in schizoaffective meds.
And you kind of hit the nail on the head here. I mean, I was thinking of another case I worked on with Drew, where the mother's frustration with her son's kind of change with the meds, where she was doing.
So, Sally, that's a good thing to go, or Brenda, that's a good thing to go over. I think this guy was just done with the control his parents had over him. And I would say, well, at that point, you're 32 years old, break free and become your own man, become an adult, maybe get a job and live on your own. I mean, if you're getting $10,000 a month previously, unless you just squandered all of the money, you should have a little bit of some savings there, which it doesn't sound like he did because of addiction and whatever else. But you do your own thing, right? You don't have to do what he did.
Kind of what your reporters are doing. She was going to try to find her son at various parks, at various outdoor drug emporiums, because she was deathly afraid of the result that would happen, and what would end up happening, especially the child parent dynamic, because unfortunately in these very extreme situations, when they do this, they act out with their closest loved ones in ways that are almost unimaginable. And I've had those cases, and they're incredibly frustrating. And to the point that you just made about 5150, 5152, and these holds, it's incredibly difficult in California, the Lanham and Petrus Act, LPS, and all of that legislation, which was well-intentioned, decades ago, has become, like a lot of things, the law of unintended consequences, where it's virtually impossible to get somebody kind of locked down when you see them in this kind of mental distress, where it's not going to end well. And the loved ones around you, every bone in their body, every fiber of their DNA knows that it's not going to end well. And there's very, very little that you can do. And this is a persistent problem that we have, and that he will have. By the way, one of the things that's interesting about the observation that he's puppy-like or childlike right now He's in Twin Towers. Twin Towers is downtown here in the mental health wing, if you will, although many sheriffs describe the county jail system as a giant mental institution, but there is the worst of the worst are housed in the Twin Towers. His current mental state is a pretty good argument for the defense, for the public defender at this point, that it was the meds, because now he's under observation 24/7. They can use those records. They will use those records in a competency or an NGI proceeding.
Now, Art, that is a very interesting point here to make, because I used to believe in free will 100% until I started listening to people like Sam Harris and how they can measure like how little choice people actually have, but it's actually troubling. But he would break it down as follows. He would say, you don't choose your parents, you don't choose your genes, you don't choose your height, you don't choose your face. So he's like, you don't choose all of these things that really matter in terms of how you turn out. And they've done studies that say, yeah, you probably have much less free will than you think you do. So people like Sam Harris and many of the atheists, they don't believe you have any. They call it the illusion of free will. And I agree, it's kind of a troubling thought. And I think while it probably is true that we don't, I try to act like I do have it anyway, because I don't like thinking that I don't. Because the other thing about it is, if you truly don't, then it kind of negates any good accomplishments you have as well. Like, oh, you had no choice. You're just going to do it. And if you have no choice, to me, you don't, like, it ruins it. But that's just me. It's an interesting debate topic. Because some people certainly do believe in free will, and our justice system is predicated upon free will.
To show this is what he's like when he can't self-medicate, when they calibrate the medication right, he becomes this kind of docile puppy-like individual.
I think that hurts him. I think that hurts him if because we don't know whether the docile. I don't believe the docile puppy-like thing is what was going on in the month before the murder, because I have spoken with people. I have spoken with people who were close to the Reiners, who told me Michelle in particular was pulling her hair out because she didn't know what else to do, that they had exhausted everything. And in the month before the murders, as they watched him, she was just, she beside herself, not knowing what to do. And the doctors weren't really solving anything. So I don't think he was that kind of docile person back then. And I think there's evidence to show that, because he was dangerous and he was erratic in that month.
Well, I believe, have talked to people. I know that I've talked to people who saw him at the party.
At the Conan party.
He was anything but the way he's described to me now in Twin Towers, a month out.
Right. I mean he was bizarre. And when we talked to people at the hotel that he went to after he killed Robin Michelle, and they said he looked totally tweaked out when he was there. So, look, there's plenty of evidence. What I have been thinking about a lot is, on the one hand, you've got a guy who's got a huge mental problem that a lot of people say the mental health system failed him and failed Robin Michelle. And most people in the jury probably know.
And that's the most I've really heard about his mother, Michelle, how she was pulling her hair out of her head, trying to figure out how to best help her son. And let's face it, it's a very helpless and terrible feeling to be a parent and watch your kid struggle with mental health and addiction, maybe even a personality disorder. That is not fun. Like, that has got to be a heartbreaking experience, especially when you consider how it ended. And what's the best thing to do? I mean, you got to take it case by case.
Somebody who has had mental struggles like this, and there'll be a lot of sympathy in that regard. On the other side is that if he was doing meth, it's a medical issue about self-medicating to kind of tamp down the noise and everything else. But when people hear somebody did drugs and that they see the autopsy photos, which you know they're going to show, right? And they're horrendous. They are going to show these autopsy photos. I remember in the O.J. Simpson case that the jury just recoiled when they saw those pictures.
They wheeled. You're absolutely right.
These
They
are as
wheeled
bad. These are
right?
at least as bad.
I've
And
heard that I'm telling you, I have heard that it is the most horrific. Now, mind you, a lot of the people who are there now presently were not in that office at the time of OJ, but I know that people who are there now are traumatized just by the photos.
yeah. And when they see that and the overlay of knowing who Rob Reiner was and all, I don't know. I mean, this feels like whatever jury ends up getting picked, emotion is going to be as important as law.
The interesting thing, and you just hit on it, is in every case that I have where you talk to a jury panel and there are mental health issues or drug style issues, substance abuse, and you ask the jury panel, either collectively or individually, has this touched your family in one way or another? It's almost universal. And that's
the thing. Those jury members and everyone in the courtroom, for that matter, that see these photos, that's got to be a horror show. They're going to need a psychologist on the scene to treat people for instant PTSD. I mean, it's probably what Romy needs now herself. She's the one who found one of them. She found her dad.
why I'm sure, as I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm sure as Habib was sitting there at the press conference and Hochman was saying, we're confident we're going to get a guilty conviction. But you don't want to be, number one, that cocky about it, because there are always, especially in Los Angeles, in a jury panel, out of any 12 people, I'm incredulous to believe that you could have less than half of them who don't have an immediate family member or one degree of connection to somebody who's dealing with these kinds of issues. And the sheer frustration, the way that you just feel like there's nothing you can do when somebody's in one of these crises.
Is it even plausible that, we know our DA, Nathan Hochman, and he is, he is a guy that goes full bore in situations like this. If he evaluates what you just said, which is that half the jury is going to know somebody, they're going to have some sympathy, that there are all sorts of issues involving mental health and everything else, is it possible that they would plea bargain this? Because if they plea bargain it, he's going to prison for a long time. Hochman's not going to put him in a mental institution. So then I guess the question would, even if Hochman were inclined to plea bargain, which I don't think he is, would the defense plea bargain where he ends up in prison for decades, knowing that he has a terrible mental illness? I mean, I don't see a plea bargain here.
Let me tell you my analysis of it. Number one, Alan withdrew.
Alan Jackson
as his private defense lawyer. That signals to me that the family is equivocating on their support, which is understandable.
I don't think that's true, but we can get into that later. But I don't. I don't.
Well, I'd love to hear your.
No, I just don't think. I don't think the family is jettisoning him just based on what I know, and there are things I can't talk about.
I don't want to say jettisoning. I just say equivocating. I think that just as you mourn your parents, there are stages of grief, and I think that they're understandably working through that. Having said that, Nathan Hochman has proven he does not care what the family thinks, having been there, done that.
Menendez.
Right. And I suspect that there is no way that they would agree to, I think the opposite. I don't think they would ever agree to a prison term. I think they might. I think it's a lot more plausible. If I was going to do a bell curve, it's a lot more plausible that the DA.
So think of this. This guy, Mark Garagos, is 68. Harvey Levin is 75. He is 7 years younger than him. Can you believe it?
Would agree to a mental health placement for a period of time if it turns out that much of what we are saying is true. If they get back, and mind you, they can always, there's going to be a panel of experts in Los Angeles. The Superior Court has a list of mental health experts. The DA's office will pick their mental health expert. The defense will pick, the public defender will pick their mental health expert. The judge is going to be the one who makes the decision as to who to believe, because generally you will find that there are ones who lean towards the prosecution view, there are ones that lean towards the defense view. But absent unanimity amongst the experts and the judge making the call, there may be a point at which they say, let's defer this, let's get him kind of stabilized in a Atascadero or some kind of a place like that. And you don't give away the case, but you defer the case. It gets basically presses pause. I think that's more likely.
I got to stop you. I don't get that, because what you're saying is that you send him to a place like a Atascadero, which is a mental institution, and he's there for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. But then what? He gets better, and then you prosecute him?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. It's an endless cycle. The problem with
why wouldn't the defense then just roll the dice?
Well, because if the determination is that he is so down, for lack of the vernacular, down the rabbit hole of the competency is such a question mark for the defense, why would you want to roll the dice? Why would you even want to go there? And by the way, legally, ethically, I'm not even sure that a defense lawyer, if they've got a reasonable belief that the person is not competent, that they can even proceed, because the person is not knowing.
Well, let's assume he jumps. This all assumes he jumps that hurdle and he's competent to stand trial. Right. So if he jumps that hurdle and he's competent to stand trial, if they stabilize his drugs and he's not going to be using meth because he's in jail right now,
presumably.
Presumably. I just do not see this case believe. I don't see Nathan Hochman saying, "Yeah, let's put him in a mental institution." I don't see that. And I also think,
well, yes, because he's not going to. I will tell you that the odds are, if I'm laying odds, the odds of the LA County DA's office in its current structure agreeing to a not guilty by reason of insanity are zero.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I mean, if they could push off any kind of you're not competent to be held trial for 5 to 10 years, that's a win for Nick Reiner. And that's an L for the prosecution. You can't let that happen if you're the prosecution. That would just be. And I don't even think you'd be able to do that if this was anyone else except for Nick Reiner or the celebrity case. But I don't think the public defender is going to be able to swing that. But what do you think, Chap?
Okay, so let's table this now. We are going to continue to look at this, but I am telling you that everything we know, and in particular what Mark and what I'm saying too, what we've all heard about how gruesome these murders are, this is not just a change of meds. This feels like meth.
I'm not disagreeing. I mean, they normally the change of meds, it would be an internal. You'd be worried about somebody's safety to themselves, not outwardly. But
and generally, I would agree with that. But it looks like they've changed their tunes. They changed their tune here. Now they think it's meth. Interesting. Alan Jackson's off the case. All of a sudden, maybe it was meth after all. Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
Thank you, Harvey.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
How about that? And I would also agree with that too. Generally, a med change would make you more dangerous to yourself. Generally. But that doesn't mean 100%. Especially if you add other things, personality disorders plus substances. Yeah, then you might be more dangerous to others as well. This is the interesting part in this one.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here,
where have we been? What's coming to a theater near you for the feature presentation? I mean, that's kind of where we're at in the Nick Reiner case, trying to figure out what's the next step in this combobulation of chaos that has been this case since the tragedy took place in December. Let's go through where things are at right now and kind of get you caught up to speed on all of it. And while we do, continue the conversation in our comment section on our YouTube channel. If you're not there already, Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. You can join in our conversation there, or our Substack channel. The link is in the description. It's on the screen right now on YouTube. It's hiddenkillers.substack.com. And by the way, it's free to join right now. No ads, no paywall. You just join and you can communicate directly with me. So let's continue our conversation on there as we go through this off the air. January 7th, 2026, big day in this case. Los Angeles Superior Court. It was supposed to be Nick Reiner's arraignment, the moment he'd stand before a judge and enter his plea for allegedly stabbing his parents to death in their Brentwood home. And Alan Jackson, as we all know, walked into that courtroom as Nick Reiner's attorney, one of the most prominent defense lawyers in the country, the man who just secured the murder acquittal in the Karen Reed case, one of the most watched trials in recent memory, the man who represented Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey. He walked in ready to fight, and then he asked to be removed from the case. But here's the thing. Before he left, before he handed Nick Reiner over to the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office, and we'll get to that in a second, Alan Jackson walked outside that courthouse, stood in front of every camera in Los Angeles, and said something that should make everyone pay attention. Quote, "We've investigated this matter top to bottom, back to front. What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the law of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder." Print that. He's always so dramatic. This isn't an attorney hedging his bets. This isn't my client deserves his day in court or everyone is entitled to a defense. That's a declaration. This is a man who wins high-profile cases, telling the entire world that he knows something they don't. So what the hell happened in that courtroom? And what does Alan Jackson know that we don't? Or has he really just connected the dots the same way that we've been connecting the dots over here on technicalities? And here's how this would play out if you're to go down this path and run it through what California deems an insanity defense. Let's start with what Alan Jackson said about why he withdrew. He told reporters it was due to circumstances beyond our control, but more importantly, circumstances beyond Nick's control. He added that he was legally and ethically prohibited from explaining the reasons why.
And this video is going to go over some things that are quote unquote sealed. So we'll see what he has to say about this.
And I get it. Legally and ethically prohibited. That's not a throwaway line. That's an attorney choosing his words very carefully because he knows the rules he's operating under. Attorney-client privilege, court orders, professional ethics. Something is preventing him from telling us more. And whatever it is, it's apparently binding enough that one of the most media-savvy lawyers in America won't touch it. But here's what's interesting. Jackson didn't just withdraw and disappear. He didn't issue a bland statement and walk away. He emphasized that his team remains deeply committed to Nick Reiner and his best interests. I found that one interesting too. I don't know if that's just lawyerese for have a nice day. We wish you the best. Thoughts and prayers.
So someone in the chat asked, is it possible that Alan Jackson just thought that he couldn't win? And yeah, it's possible. But I also think he doesn't take the case to begin with, if that's the only mitigating factor. Oh, I don't want to go through with this if he's actually guilty. Now, I think it's the money. I think there was a money being pulled. Jake and Romy pulled the plug, and the public defender thing proves it, honestly. So if it wasn't money, why doesn't he have another lawyer? The fact that he doesn't, to me, proves it's a money thing. He wouldn't be able to get a public defender if it wasn't a money thing.
Good luck. And, we're deeply committed to Nick Reiner and his bet. Yeah, I mean, you can be deeply committed to something and not actually be an active participant in it. A lot of people are like that in lives. Or is there more? I don't know. I mean, you don't say that if you're not abandoning a client you think is guilty. You don't say that if you're walking away because the case is unwinnable. You say that if something procedural, something outside the facts of the case itself is forcing your hand. And then you walk outside and tell everyone your client is not guilty of murder under California law. Take it to the bank. Jackson signed on to represent Nick Reiner the day after his arrest. That was December 15th. He withdrew January 7th.
I think I am doing a favor to the truth when I emphasize that you can't get a public defender unless money is the problem.
3 weeks. 3 weeks is a lot of time. It's enough to find something significant. And Nick's first court appearance in December, Jackson told reporters they were very complex and serious issues associated with this case, issues that needed to be thoroughly and very carefully dealt with and examined and looked at and analyzed. He wasn't specific, and he really couldn't be, but he was signaling that his case wasn't as straightforward as it looked. Before he withdrew, Jackson told the court there were 10 outstanding subpoenas in the defense's investigation.
Tony's phone ringing there. I heard it.
10. And the judge sealed the list. The prosecution doesn't even know who the defense was trying to reach. I know that. I mean, whatever witness or records Jackson was chasing, he convinced a judge they needed to be kept secret, even from the DA's office. That's not standard procedure. That's kind of strategic. That's the defense team protecting something that they found. So what kind of subpoenas would you need for an insanity defense? Medical records from the medication change that reportedly happened about a month before the killings, psychiatric evaluations, treatment facility records from those reported 18-plus rehab stays, witnesses from Conan O'Brien's holiday party who allegedly saw Nick acting erratically the night before, people who interacted with him in the days and weeks leading up to December 14th, anyone who could speak to his mental state. Those kind of subpoenas? Jackson found something in those 3 weeks, something in those records or those witness statements or those medical files, something that made him confident enough to stand on courthouse steps and declare Nick Reiner not guilty of murder. And this is where most people get confused. So let's be clear about what Jackson said and what he didn't say. He did not say Nick Reiner didn't kill his parents. He did not claim innocence. He did not suggest there was a wrongful arrest or a case of mistaken identity. He said Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder under California law. Those are two completely different statements. An insanity defense doesn't argue. My client did it.
Under California law is probably the key thing to underline there.
Do it. It argues my client did it. But the law says he's not criminally responsible because his mental state at the time of the crime prevented him from understanding what he was doing or knowing that.
And George got me in trouble the other day because I read George's comment about Popcorn Planet, and one of his defenders came in and was like, Jared, how could you say that about Popcorn Planet? And I was like, I was just reading George's comment in the chat.
that it was wrong. That's the McNaughton rule. That's the standard in California. Did the defendant understand the nature and quality of their actions? Did they know those actions were wrong? Sources say Nick reportedly admits he killed his parents. He allegedly is not claiming memory loss or that someone else did it, but he also reportedly believes his incarceration is part of the conspiracy against him. That's not someone saying I didn't do it. That's someone whose brain reportedly isn't processing reality correctly. That's someone who may have committed an act without understanding, legally speaking, what that act actually was. And we can get into the minutia of it. There's a whole other video I just did. Just go back in our feed a little bit or on a podcast on audio where we really get into the details of the McNaughton rule, what it means, and the standard and all of that. It goes back to the 1800s. It's an almost 200-year-old doctrine. Yeah, it's like 180 some years old. Very few states still hold it. Canada still holds it. California still holds it. There's a few others that do too. It's essentially part of the rules in that state where, you could pull off this defense there, travel 700 miles in another direction to another state. You couldn't, because they wouldn't have that same set of rules. Essentially, view it as a game, if you will. And obviously, this is not a game. I'm not trying to downplay it, but think of a board game. You get the rules out. You can't play Candyland by Monopoly rules. You can't play Monopoly by Candyland rules. One of them has these rules. One of them has those rules. It's like states. They all have a different set of rules. What you can do in one, you can't necessarily do in the other. Does it change morally, ethically, anything about the crime? No, it's all about interpretation. And it's an interpretation by a state, not a human. But the humans are charged with interpreting those states' rules. So that's what's going on. Okay? I know it's really easy to get caught up in the, asshole, this, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, whatever. You can make your judgments on all that, but that's not what's going on. He's following the rules. That's what the attorneys do. They have to play by the rules. They're looking at them, they're deciphering them, they're interpreting them, and according to Jackson, you play it through that filter, that's how it comes out on the other end. And you know what? He might be completely right. Jackson's declaration wasn't about innocence. It was about criminal responsibility. And apparently, he found enough evidence to convince himself that Nick Reiner doesn't meet the legal threshold for murder. Not because Nick didn't kill his parents, but because Nick's...
And one thing you'll know about the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect, the Shepherd of Black Sheep, is every night I have popcorn, carrots, and an orange. It's my nighttime routine. Popcorn, carrot, orange. PCO.
Mind allegedly was incapable of forming the intent that the law requires. There's another piece of this that's been largely overlooked. A sealed confidential medical order was signed by the judge overseeing Nick Reiner's case. Sources say it relates to the mental health condition and treatment. NBC4 reported that 3 sources with direct knowledge of the case confirmed Nick was being treated for schizophrenia at the time of the murders. That's a separate form, or perhaps a clarification of the schizoaffective disorder diagnosis that's been reported elsewhere. Either way, we're talking about a serious psychiatric disorder, the kind that causes delusions and hallucinations, the kind that fundamentally alters how someone perceives.
Well, here's the thing. There's a method to my madness. Popcorn is for fiber. Fiber is best taken in the evenings. Carrots are to get the popcorn out of my teeth, really, and as a serving of vegetable. Orange is for a serving of fruit, so vitamin C. That's the method of the madness.
Reality. What could be in that sealed order? Findings about Nick's mental state from jail psychiatrists, evaluations conducted since his arrest, orders related to medication and treatment, maybe something about the medication change that reportedly happened before the killings, the one that sources say sent him in.
Yes, Hannah, it would be a stage 5 emergency if I don't have one of the 3, and I make sure it doesn't happen. I even have I'll, in desperate times, come to desperate measures. If I don't have an orange, I get a single serving orange from 7-Eleven.
To the spiral.
Or I'll even get a bagged popcorn, which is not what I prefer. I prefer microwave popcorn, not in a bag, but free kernels with just a little bit of oil, not the bagged popcorn, because there's all sorts of tomfoolery in there.
The judge sealed it for a reason, to protect the defense strategy, to prevent tainting the jury pool, to maintain medical privacy, but also, and this is the part that matters because whatever's in there is significant enough that everyone agreed it needed to be kept out of public view. Alan Jackson saw what was in that order. He knows what the psychiatric evaluations say. And then he walked outside and told us Nick Reiner.
And then other people, what they did was they said, Jared, I'm unsubscribing. You went over whatever the heck that woman's name is and her husband. They're terrible. Unsubscribe. And I was like, okay.
Is not guilty of murder. The obvious theory for Jackson's withdrawal is money. And look, it is not crazy. He's not confirmed nor denied that. Alan Jackson doesn't come cheap. Legal experts estimate a retainer in a case like this is about 7 figures. Taking it to trial, well north of $1 million. Someone has to pay that bill. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. He's worked his way up as one of the most effective and best defense attorneys in the nation. It comes with a price tag. He can command that. That's how our system works. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It is what it is. But if you don't have the money to pay that, then you're not going to get him as your attorney. He doesn't operate on good vibes. Nick Reiner reportedly lived in his...
So, Mike, I did interview a guy named Drew several years ago now, and we talked all about plant medicine, and he talked about his experiences with ayahuasca. So if you want, watch that Plant Medicine with Drew interview that I did to learn all about it.
Parents' guest house. He was allegedly receiving $10,000 monthly allowance from them. According to reports, he wasn't independently wealthy. He wasn't funding his own defense. And here's the brutal irony. Under California's Slayer statute, if you kill someone, you can't inherit from them. Nick allegedly killed both of his parents, which means he can't touch a dime of their estate. The money that reportedly kept him afloat his entire adult life, the money that allegedly paid for rehab after rehab, after rehab, after rehab, after rehab, after rehab, after rehab, after.
And yes, Kat, I am like a Sour Patch Kid. I'm first sour, but then I'm sweet.
Rehab, after rehab, and 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 his lifestyle, that would have eventually come to him. That money is now legally off limits. So, who was paying Alan Jackson? Likely the family. Again, this is all pure conjecture and speculation and opinion and allegedly and everything else that goes along with it. Who was likely paying Alan Jackson? The family, the siblings, the estate, someone with access to the Reiner money. Again, speculation. And apparently...
And I agree. Probably Jake and Jerome. But then I think after they got some time to digest what happened, and maybe they even saw pictures of the crime scene, and they were like, I don't know about this one, Jack.
That's someone stopped. But here's the problem with that theory. Jackson specifically said the circumstances were beyond Nick's control. Nick never controlled the money. His parents did. Now his siblings do. If the family cut off funding, is that beyond Nick's control? I would probably say, yeah. More importantly, why make the not guilty declaration if you're just getting stiffed in the bill? You don't stake your professional reputation on a client you're abandoning over fees. You don't tell the world to print that and take it to the bank if you're walking away bitter about unpaid invoices. I don't think he's bitter about unpaid invoices at all. We don't know that that even is an issue here. We don't know what sort of money changed hands, if anything. But money might be part of the story, but it's not the whole story. Something else forced Jackson's hand, something he can't talk about, something that has nothing to do with whether he believes in Nick Reiner's defense, because he clearly still does. Deputy Public Defender Kimberly Green is now representing Nick Reiner. I know what people are thinking. Public defender, that's a downgrade. That's a death sentence for his case. Not necessarily. The Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office handles death penalty cases regularly. They have resources. They have investigators. They have access to expert witnesses. They do this work every day, and they actually have a better track record than private attorneys in death penalty cases. So if you're facing the death penalty in California, your odds of getting off or a lesser sentence actually lie with a public defender, not Alan Jackson. Interesting, I know. Although if it is, we're playing odds here, and Alan Jackson is kind of an outlier in the odds game. He's the diamond in the rough, where it's like if you get him, your odds probably go way up, as compared to the averages of all of the private attorneys that are out there that you could hire. I'm not saying anything bad about them, but if you're a public defender, you work these type of cases statistically more frequently than most private attorneys would. Just statistically, you do. So if we're playing those, we're going by laws of averages here, and at the end of the day, nothing is an average. Everything's a unique situation. But if we're doing that, then your odds increase because they have more reps. You have a better opportunity, if you don't have resources, of going with that public defender than necessarily the private one. I know.
And again, and that's one of the things where you can't even change it. Like, okay, say you're have a capital offense against you. You're like, hey, I want a public defender. They're better by the numbers. And they would say, well, sorry, you must pay because you can afford one. So it's one of those statistics that it's like, it's an interesting statistic, but one that you can do nothing about.
An insanity defense is an insanity defense. The evidence is the evidence. The psychiatric evaluations say what they say. The medical records show what they show. A public defender can present that evidence just as effectively as a private attorney. But there's a transition problem. Jackson spent 3 weeks investigating. He had subpoenas out. He knew where to look and who to talk to. Does Green inherit all that work? Does she have access to what Jackson found, or does she start from scratch? Continuity matters in a case this complex, especially when the defendant's mental state is the entire ballgame. Maybe Jackson's courthouse statement was strategic. Maybe he wanted to put on the public record what was investigated, or what his investigation revealed, so it doesn't get lost in the handoff. So everyone knows what direction this defense was heading. So the new attorney has a roadmap, even if she doesn't have the file. Meanwhile, the prosecution isn't backing down. DA Nathan Hochman issued his own statement after Jackson withdrew. Quote, "We are fully confident that a jury will convict Nick Reiner beyond a reasonable doubt for the brutal murder of his parents, Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner, and do so unanimously." Notice the language. Brutal murder. Not neutral. That's the prosecutor framing this case for the public before it even gets to trial, because it was a brutal murder. The problem is, can you show that Nick Reiner understood the depths of what he was actually doing when he did it, if he did it? The charges are serious. 2 counts of first-degree murder.
And remember to like the video out there, folks, and subscribe to the channel.
Murder with special circumstances, multiple murders, and use of a deadly weapon. That means the death penalty is on the table. Hochman says he'll consider the family's wishes before deciding whether to pursue it, and the surviving siblings have reportedly indicated they're not in favor, but he hasn't ruled it out. The decision ultimately lands with him. Considering California has not put anyone to death in decades, although it is still a penalty and people are still sentenced to it, doesn't mean it's actually ever going to happen. But it could. And if you're going to keep that on the table, it just made your trial that much more complex, because then you have to have death penalty qualified attorneys. It's going to take more time. There's more leniency. There's more grace to take your time to make sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, because you don't want that done the opposite way in a death penalty case. If expedition of this case is in anyone's interest, if Nick Reiner wants this to go in any sort of speedy direction, it being a death penalty case is not the way you want it to go. It's going to take longer. And it should. Someone's life is on the line. Will the prosecution go there? In my opinion, I'm going to guess no. I'm going to guess they might go with what the Reiners probably want.
Is it possible that Jake and Romy were like, you know what? A public defender has a better chance than a paid attorney? Maybe you should cut him off. I doubt that's what it was, though. I doubt.
Life behind bars or life in an institution. That's my prediction and conjecture. The prosecution has evidence. They have the gas station surveillance video showing Nick calmly buying a drink hours after the killings. They'll frame that as consciousness of guilt. He fled the scene. He knew what he did. He was composed enough to stop for a Gatorade before getting arrested. But Jackson clearly isn't worried about that video. He saw the same footage everyone else saw, and he still walked outside and declared Nick not guilty of murder. Two experienced legal minds looking at the same facts. One says conviction is certain. One says take.
And again, what is Alan Jackson supposed to say? He's not going to say, oh, by the way, I think he's guilty. Oh, by the way, good luck to you, public defender, but you're screwed. You're not going to be able to get him an NGI. Of course he's not going to say that. He's going to do the public defender a public courtesy and acts like he thinks he's just as innocent as he was saying before, and then bow out. Like, think about it. What else? It would be unheard of for Alan Jackson to do something different than that.
Get to the bank, he's not guilty. One of them is wrong. The question is which one? So why did Alan Jackson find in 3 weeks, or what did he find in 3 weeks that made him so certain? What's in those medical records? What did these psychiatric evaluations reveal? What did witnesses from that party tell his investigators? What's in that sealed order that the judge doesn't want anyone to see? We don't know. We can't know. Not yet. He told the world to take it to the bank. That means there's cards he's holding that he thinks are winners, unless it's a bluff. The question is whether those cards transfer to a public defender.
It could definitely be a bluff, Tony Bruschi. You know that. And yeah, I mean, this Tony Bruschi, he likes to kind of summarize his other videos in these kinds of videos. I think it's just like a content filler. Like, he's like, okay, I talked to this person and this person. Let me make an entire video that's basically summarizing these other videos. Is kind of what this video is.
Whether Kimberly Green can pick up where Jackson left off, or whether the defense he was building survives the handoff, or whether it stays locked in Alan Jackson's briefcase, legally and ethically prohibited from being shared. I do not know the answer to that question. I would guess, based on what we've seen from Alan Jackson and him stating to the effect that, he cares about this case. He cares about the interest of Nick Reiner. I don't see any reason why that information wouldn't be shared with the new counsel. Again, my conjecture. Nick Reiner's arraignment has been pushed now to February 23rd. As of the most recent reports, his medications still aren't stabilized. The question of whether he's even competent to stand trial, whether he understands the proceedings and can participate in his own defense, hasn't been resolved. We might be months away from that determination, maybe longer. There's a lot of cases where it comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes. This case could exist in legal limbo for years. Competency hearings, psychiatric evaluations, medication adjustments, more hearings, the ping pong that happens when someone's brain won't cooperate with the legal system's timeline. Meanwhile, Rob and Michelle Reiner are dead, stabbed to death in their own home, allegedly by the son they spent nearly 2 decades trying to save. Their surviving children are grieving.
You could also say you can put a fork in Nick because he's done.
The entertainment industry is mourning, and Nick Reiner sits in a jail cell, reportedly believing his incarceration is a conspiracy against him. Alan Jackson says Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. The DA says he's fully confident in a conviction. Somewhere between those two statements is the truth. And right now, the only person who seems to know what that truth looks like is a defense attorney who just walked off the case, but not before making damn sure everyone heard what he had to say. Take it to the bank. Print that. The question isn't whether Nick Reiner killed his parents. The question is what California law says about a mind that's broken enough to do it. Alan Jackson spent 3 weeks finding his answers. Now it's up to someone else to prove it. Where do you think it's going? Give me your thoughts in the comment section. Let's continue this off the air. I'll be watching for your thoughts on YouTube and on our Substack, where you can communicate directly with me. Check it out. It's absolutely free right now for a limited time. HiddenKillers.substack.com. The link is on your screen if you're watching us on YouTube right now. It's also in the description of this episode. Please join us over there, and you'll get access to our videos a day in advance of everyone else, too. Ad-free. And
all right. That's the end of Tony Bruschi there. So what they have said is that the wife of Renee Good is going to bring a lawsuit. That is not surprising. And I wonder if Mr. AJ, Alan Jackson, would want to take that case. Wouldn't that be, besides this Reiner case and the McKee case, it probably would be in the top 3 of cases if it becomes a thing. Now, granted, she's probably trying to make it a civil case. That's different than a criminal case. But it would still certainly be a very popular case. That's for sure. Now, I would not be surprised if if that happens. I would not be surprised. I would be surprised if Nick Reiner is found to be incompetent to stand trial. I would be surprised with that. I would not be surprised if Renee Good's wife tries to file some sort of lawsuit. That would not surprise me. That would not. But this upcoming week, I got everyone's favorite doctor, Dr. Salerno, coming on the show. We're going to go over his new book, Cruelty by Nature. So let me know any questions you'd like me to ask him about things. Then we got Mike King after that. Then we got to get friend of the channel, Dr. Z. And who else? Mark Vicente. I'm due to speak to Mark Vicente about something, so we'll see how that goes. BS Kat and George, you both got me in lots of trouble. The person said something along the lines of, how dare you make a personal comment towards Popcorn Planet? I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? I don't really make personal comments. And I was like, oh, I read the comments. I read the comments about him, and it got me in trouble. And they said, you're just Jared, you add nothing to the table. You're just making condescending comments. I was like, I think I bring a little more than condescending comments to the table. Lots of personal experience with addiction, mental health, experiencing narcissistic abuse. Where else can you get that if not here? And Jared said he was having milkshakes. Oh, that was my version then of a condescending comment. So I'll blame you, Kat. I'll blame shift to Kat and George. Not my fault. You started it, and it got me in trouble. And I offered him the milkshake from There Will Be Blood. Ah, I have a milkshake. You have a milkshake. But nope, I must do better. I cannot read disparaging comments about other creators. It'll come back to bite me. Thank you, Melissa. I hope everyone here is feeling better. I'm feeling a little better today. I had to go for another hour to hour and a half nap today, but I made it. And I'm hoping tomorrow I'll be like 100%, because today was not a complete 100%. No, Kat, I have to take responsibility. I joke about blame shifting, but I'm the one who has the consequences, right? It's my channel, my business, so I have to own it. I have to own it, what I say. Yes, Phil Bradley, you were neither early nor late. You were just on time. I think Jared is always respectful and humorous with his comments. Thank you, Tony. I try to be. But that one, I mentioned the milkshake part. That was a bridge too far. Bridge too far there. But it goes to show you, if anyone out there is thinking about becoming a creator, some people get their magnifying glass out and they try to cross-examine you. They cross-examine everything you say. Hey there, Deb. Welcome. Well, welcome. And it's about time to wrap this up here, too. But it's a lesson. The lesson is you got to be on your P's and Q's. Dot your I's, cross your T's. That's the lesson. Right, Ellie? Ellie knows that's the lesson. We got to see if we can get Jolly back in here, too. Yes, not getting them the attention is the best way to go. Got to see where Jolly is. Jolly hasn't been in here for a minute. Oh, how intriguing, Danielle. You make it sound like not this channel. You have like a hidden account on us. I don't know. Punctuations and question marks? Is that what that means? Punctuation and quotation? That's a good question, Zelda. I just say it mindlessly. What does mind your P's and Q's mean? Let's see. Oh, I was wrong. Be polite, careful, and on your best behavior, especially with your manners or what you say. Interesting. Where it comes from, the exact origin is debated, but popular theories include printing. Early printers had to be careful not to mix up lowercase p and q. Interesting. Pub slang, pints p and quarts q. Mind how much you drink. I was going to do this, explaining the origins of popular expressions. I did that on some of my YouTube videos. French influence, pieds and culs, feet and tails, referring to formal manners. Regardless of origin, today it simply means mind your manners. If you want a snarky synonym, a modern rewrite, or a short form caption, just say the word, it says. Yes, what kind of content does Danielle make? That might be good for ASMR then, Tony. There's a, well, not everyone's meant to be a creator, but some people certainly are. And so, soothing voice, good for ASMR. OnlyFans. Well, Danielle did say she used to dance. You can dance if you want to. You can leave your friends behind. That's an inappropriate joke, Kat. What are we going to do with you? We don't want to out Danielle. Yeah, see? That's what ChatGPT said. To mind your pints and quarts. You made her bashful, Kat. Look what you did. We'll see. If she's comfortable sharing, she'll share. Now, there's no new news on McKee. It was just more about like how he was abusive before, threatened her life. We went over that case a few days in a row, and I don't think there's anything new. I think it's kind of, we got to wait for the next thing to happen. Jared on OnlyFans, I'll use that instead of a Patreon. Wild Wizards, we'll call it. Wizards Gone Wild. Wizards Gone Wild, and I have my friends on there too, like the narcissistic abuse OnlyFans. Nope, no social medias for the thin-skinned, that's for sure. Maybe. But all right, guys. Got to wrap it up here. I got to figure out what we'll be going over tomorrow. But thanks, everyone, for participating in the chat. It's great to have you all here. Take a minute to enjoy the fact that there's such a great flock of black sheep here, which is good. I do have a Revenge the Black Sheep shirt, which is awesome. To Thrive. Thank you for this. My e-parent misplaces empathy to the narc. Is that empathy, parent? Rather than me, scapegoat truth teller, and confides in me about wanting to leave. Can you discuss with Salerno? When you say e-parent, is that your empathetic parent? Or enabler parent? Got to understand the question. Now you caught at least an hour of it, Kat. Empathy misplaces empathy to the narc rather than me and confides in me about wanting to leave. Okay, I get it now. So that is enabler parent. And she empathizes with the narcissist because they're in a trauma bond with them, right? That's a tough one. It's a tough one because, as you know, if someone's not ready to see it, they're not ready to see it. And it's tough. You got an SDN? I will talk about it, though, with him. And I can talk about it myself, too. We can both go over it. Thank you again, 2-5. Yes, enabler. Safer parent. Yes. You know, what you could do, I'd made a video, narcissistic father, enabler mother, or narcissistic mother, enabler father. Those would be videos to kind of let them see by accident. Because those are the people that would say, oh, you know, your dad's had a long day at work. Or can you please just get along with your mother? Can't we all get along so we can go back to normal? All the enabler things, right? And it's because they don't know how to stand up for themselves. Maybe they never learned or they unlearned, and it keeps that dishonest harmony going, if there's even dishonest harmony at all. The truth can be told and felt. That's a good way to put it, Melissa. I like that. And I like that too, Ellie. You deserve to be safe and protected. SDNDE, Kat, yes, I share my survivor story on here. I'm helping others, CSA survivors and trafficking survivors, to heal their lives. And that's awesome. I'm all for more people sharing the stories and sharing their experience, strength, and hope. That's how, and when people share their stories honestly, it's more likely to help the most amount of people. Absolutely. And that's good, Mike. There's nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, not everyone did, though. Yes, narcs have fake empathy. Well, you could say they can pretend to have cognitive empathy. Even the covert narcissist can just simply fake it. And it can be pretty convincing. Sing a banshee. That's good. Singing or a good car ride or laughter, those are different forms of therapy that are just as effective, I would say. In fact, they'll do something for you that no therapy ever could. Don't ever forget that. Yes, you've heard me say that, haven't you, George? Pain shared is pain lessened. D, hi and bye, D. We'll be back again tomorrow, don't worry. It can, Brenda. You got to pick and choose your battles sometimes. I don't want anyone to put themselves in an unsafe position. Speaking of going back to normal, there's Danielle. She hid for a minute, but she's back. Look into Stephen Hilton in LA. We'll take a look at it. Yep, and that's true, Tony. Rules for thee, but not for me, is what they have because they're hypocrites with double standards. Don't ever forget it. Thank you very much for this, Jude. I appreciate your support. Very awesome of you. I love it. So I say things in the sing-songy way to help you all remember. Pain shared is pain lessened. This too shall pass. Yes. You do always need to be safe. I can't emphasize that enough. They turn on you and trash you, turn others against you. It's about choosing sides. Correct. Good night, Brenda. All right, everybody. Time to go over and out here. But I appreciate all the super chats and the likes and the comments and the support. I wouldn't be here without you all. And we're back again tomorrow night. So over and out, everybody.